Happy Christmas week, everyone. We're the Hills Maniacs, and today we're going to be comparing two Christmas classics, A Christmas Story and A Christmas Carol.
Okay, so basically what we're going to do is we're going to try to figure out which movie we think is better between the two, or is a more classic movie, if you will,
Right.
between A Christmas Story and A Christmas Carol. So, what do you think, Steven? When thinking of Christmas movies and thinking of these two, which one do you think is the more iconic or the more classic movie of the two?
Well, when you think about it, both movies really have a sort of life lesson to them, I guess. Like, when you think about A Christmas Story, it's all about that, like, childhood and really wanting something for Christmas and doing whatever you can to get that thing for Christmas. Like, for example, Ralphie, the main character in the movie, he puts a magazine like under his mom's pillow or whatever to try and get her to see, because he wants a Red Ryder BB gun, so he puts like the ad for that on her bed so she sees it.
Right.
He tries to bring it up casually in conversations and things like that, and everyone keeps telling him like, you'll shoot your eye out, and that's like a running gag throughout the whole movie. Like, and then he still, ends up getting it anyways. But it's like that whole thing with, like, we really want something. You try to be good for Christmas. You want your parents to get you something or whatever. It's just all about this, the family and, like, just, like, living your childhood around the holidays and everything. Like, what everybody does for Christmas when you're younger. It's,
right.
That fight for really wanting something and doing whatever you can to get it. And then on the other hand, if you look at like A Christmas Carol, it's more about like the lesson that they teach you in this movie is like, really don't be a Scrooge. Don't, because it's all about Ebenezer Scrooge. He thinks Christmas is just about like spending money and everything else, and he's a businessman, so he like doesn't like Christmas for that reason. Then he learns the important lesson of like, it's not just about the money, it's about giving to other people and doing things for other people and things like that, despite how much
Right.
money it might cost and all that other stuff. So if you look at it like that in terms of like what the lesson is, or the more important lesson, honestly, I think A Christmas Carol is a better movie in that regard, and teaches a better, and there's been several different adaptations of the movie, but it still had the same core lesson.
Right.
It's still about Ebenezer Scrooge. They've had different actors that have played him and everything else. There was even an animated one back in like 2009 or something, I think it was, with Jim Carrey voiced like Ebenezer Scrooge. It was made by Disney and all this other stuff. So if you look at it like that, I'd say Christmas Carol is probably better than A Christmas Story, because even though it was remade a lot of times, it's still, I think they remade it just to try and get it to different audiences, because everybody's growing up, so it's like,
Right.
It was made in what, the 80s or something, or even before that.
Yeah.
The very first one.
Right.
I think the first one was black and white, actually, so it was even before that. And they kept making it every couple of years or something. Different actors playing them. There's even been a different like a different version of it with the movie Scrooged. It was kind of like a different way of telling that story.
Right.
But it was all still that same story. So the fact that they remade it a bunch of times to teach that lesson to other generations of kids and things like that, or anybody that watches it,
Yeah.
I think that makes it better than A Christmas Story. Even though A Christmas Story is played every Christmas, it's literally played on loop 24/7 on like a couple different channels. But I mean,
Right.
it's all in the opinion, really. But that's what I think. I think A Christmas Carol is better.
For me, see, I look at it as, if a movie is truly iconic and classic and a good movie, it should be able to withstand the test of time. And
Right.
you look at movies like Star Wars or Jaws or even Jurassic Park, ones that, yeah, they have sequels, but they were fine by themselves. And they're still iconic to where if you watch them today, they still feel the same, and it still gives you that same emotional feeling and attachment to this movie that it did the
Right.
first time you saw it, however many years ago when you saw it. And for me, I have to consider, yes, A Christmas Carol, I think, came out first. Um, and yes, it's based off of a book, but so is A Christmas Story. But for me, looking at it from that perspective, with A Christmas Carol needing to be remade every couple years to kind of fit with the current generation and what's, the current stuff going on in that, to make it more relatable, I guess, in a way, to the audience that it's trying to focus on. Whereas A Christmas Story hasn't changed, and they made a second one, which nobody really remembers anyway.
Yeah, it was like a DVD one or something.
But you look at it like that, where obviously A Christmas Carol is a good movie, and it is based off of a book, which has obviously been around for a long time. However, because they've had to remake it so many times, whether they chose to or whether it was just because the original had kind of fallen out of popularity with people, I don't know. But I think the fact that they had to make so many different versions of one movie suggests to me that A Christmas Story, holding up today as old as it is, would make it the better movie, since it only had one and didn't need to be remade. And it's still something that you hear people talk about all the time, and
Right.
they quote the movie. I know we do all the time, and our mom loves the movie, and there's a reason for it. So it's obviously a good movie, and I mean, they even made a museum out of one of the houses that the thing was filmed in. You don't see that for A Christmas Carol, right? So for me, A Christmas Story, I think, would be the better of the two movies. Not necessarily because of the plot or because of the emotional attachment that you get from watching these movies. Just based on the fact that it's held up to this point, and it's still the same and hasn't needed to change or be remade at all, I think is what makes it better for me.
Made several different versions of A Christmas Carol was to continue that, to keep that same lesson throughout the ages, because they didn't necessarily, like, I wouldn't even call them really a remake, because they literally went with, it was the same story, like,
Right.
they didn't change anything about it,
So
really.
it's a remake.
Maybe adding things to it, but it's not like, for example, like, I don't know, with the Mulan live action remake and stuff, had a lot of differences from the original Disney animated version of Mulan. But this, like, literally they kept it pretty much word for word in every adaptation of it, except for the movie Scrooged. And I'm guessing
Sure.
A Muppet Christmas Carol wasn't exactly the same either, but, like, so I don't even feel like they remade it as much as, like, they just updated it for, like, modern times or whatever. So they got a different
True.
actor to play Ebenezer Scrooge and all the other characters and things
Well,
like that.
and that was my point, though, was that they didn't need to do that for A Christmas Story. They could still get the same
Yes.
point across and build the same, give the same lesson to whatever audience it is, no matter what age they are, no matter when they watch it, because that's how good of a movie it is. It still gives that lesson through one movie. The fact that they had to remake it in order to teach the new generation of that lesson that they're trying to teach is the problem.
Yes, but if the original movie was black and white, I don't think that would hold up necessarily nowadays. And they have to remake it to fit with the modern, like, now it's DVDs and
Yeah, but
all
you can
those
take
things.
something from back then and put it on DVD. You don't need to
Yeah, I
remake it to
understand
fit
that.
with DVD.
But I just feel like it's still like you said with Christmas Story, I think this still stands the test of time. Just because they remade it, even if they hadn't remade it, it would still have stood the test of time. I just think it teaches a better lesson, because there's not really a lesson in A Christmas Story necessarily. It's just like a fun movie capturing the innocence of childhood around Christmas
Right.
and everything else. So, but, like, it doesn't really teach a life lesson to it, whereas A Christmas Carol actually does. So if you've seen either of these movies, then you know what we're talking about, But let us know down in the comments section which of these two movies did you feel is the better Christmas movie. Also, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more. This is the first video we're doing in a series that's coming up all week, where we're going to be doing Christmas related content, calling it Christmas week. So every day this week up to and including Christmas Day, we're going to be having a video related to some sort of holiday movie or things like that. We got some trivias coming up and all that kind of stuff. So if you like those sort of things, then subscribe to this channel and check those out. Thank you for watching the video, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow for the next video.
Subscribe.